Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I am getting to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started and what are they doing to stay there? And you are in for a treat today. We are talking to Brian Yanus. Brian is certified with his SPHR and his SHRM-SCP. He's the Director of Organizational Development at MV Transportation and your 2021 HRSouthwest Conference Director. And I'm so excited to have you on the show, Brian. How you doing, man?
Good morning. I'm doing very well. Thank you for the invite. Honored to be part of the leadership discussion with you, Bruce.
We're going to talk leadership today. Oh my gosh. We're going to talk leadership. We're going to talk organizational development. And we're going to talk about this upcoming HRSouthwest conference. I'm super excited to talk about. I want to start. You work for MV Transportation. I always like to ask my guests, share a brief highlight of your organization and how you serve your customers.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. So we're the largest private transportation company in the United States. So if you think about transportation in your city, you got the big buses, right? They go to the bus stops. You have the schools. You have university and corporate shows. We have those transportation services, but the dominant service we provide is what's called paratransit. It's something you don't see. Every large city has to provide service for their community with a disability. It's part of the ADA law back in the 90s. And so if you really think about it, we have a mission to provide freedom to help people get where they need to live their lives. So for those with disability, maybe it's a wheelchair accessible vehicle, or maybe it's not. Or it's maybe someone who needs to get to the grocery store with the big buses, with the bus stops, or get to their corporate headquarters. So we like to say our mission is provide freedom for people to live their lives. It's something that's been dedicated throughout our company, our values. Our founders started the company over 45 years ago, the first drivers, and now we have over 13,000 employees in the US. And so we serve our community every day. Through the pandemic, we did not stop. We did food deliveries. We did a lot of community services to keep everyone going and moving. And luckily, ridership is going back up lately and increasing so we can continue to help our community to have their freedom to live their lives.
I love that. Yeah, what I love about that is whenever you use the word mission, your mission-driven organization, you talk about values, and then of course, given that freedom is absolutely fantastic. I did not realize that piece of it, so I appreciate you sharing that, and I will definitely put a link to the organization in the show notes. So if people want to learn more about MV Transportation, they can certainly do that. Hey, tell us the Brian Yanus story. I would love to hear that. We've known each other, just to kind of preface it, we've known each other for several years through serving in the Dallas HR organization. But I would love to know, like, where did you grow up and how in the world did you get into HR and leadership?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, Lisa, for me. I'll tell you first, I don't have a Southern accent. I don't say fixin', and I don't like the Cowboys. So I'm not originally from Texas. No, I love Texas. It's my home now, but I grew up in Michigan. And anybody from Michigan knows you pull up your hand to say, here's where I am from. And so it's north of Detroit, the suburbs called Sterling Heights. I also lived in Ann Arbor area as well for several years. So I lived there for decades before moving to Texas to be closer to my family.
I'm going to stop there. I'm just going to tell everybody that's listening right now, Brian is holding up his palm and showing us exactly where he lived. I love that analogy. When we have the video up, people can see that. That's fantastic.
And so I got into HR through an indirect way, I guess you say. When I went to high school, I took a psychology course, completely different from any other course of government, politics, math, the study of human behavior. I'm like, this is interesting. And so I continued that journey through college of studying human behavior. And so I had two different choices in college. I had health psychology, really interested in how to help people with healthy behaviors, whether it's reducing smoking or living a healthy lifestyle. That intrigued me. Or you had the business side of it, industrial organization psychology, helping human behavior, employee behavior, and performance in the workplace. I wanted to avoid clinical psychology. It's just not the route that I want to go. And so when I was debating where's my passion, where I really want to make my mark, I went to the business side. I wanted to learn more about business. So I got my master's in industrial organization psychology at Radford. And then from there, I went to consulting with Aon and did a lot of selection assessment systems. You know, how do we hire people? How do we identify the right characteristics of leadership? I also did a lot of work on engagement surveys as a consultant. Then I went internal, and I've been internal ever since those early days in my career, and working with companies to help they improve their business through the people. And that's what organization development, it really is.
And we're going to talk about organizational development. I always like to ask the question though, because it sounds like to me, yes, you said, hey, I'm going to go one of these two different directions. I have these two options here in industrial organizational psychology. And you decided to go, in one direction. And I am always curious, like, was there somebody that helped you navigate? Like, I always call them mentors, right? Were there mentors in your, throughout your career that helped you? But was there someone that helped you navigate that particular decision, or were you able to make that on your own?
I've had mentors along my way, but at that point in time, it's something that I had to do a little soul searching myself.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I decided to go this route is health psychology is very intriguing. At the time, was very new. And in order to go to health psychology and almost be a sports psychologist, if you think of it, right? You had to go to the clinical side of the psychology domain. So you take all these abnormal psychology courses, and health psychology was a subfield, and it wasn't really a dominant focus of these programs. And I did not want to go to the clinical side of the psychology domain. It just wasn't of interest of mine at that time. So it's really being that, or to say, okay, where can I work with people who I feel I can make a difference with, and not sit on a couch all day, if you will. Because in my mind, back then, that's what a clinical psychologist did. And that's not for me.
Right.
I want to interact and work side by side with folks, whether that's, at the time, again, health psychology is maybe trying to motivate them. Hey, let's think about healthy behaviors. Let's not, do that right now. What can you do to avoid it? Or in the workplace, let's talk about your development. Let's talk about your leadership. How can you help others and yourself? So that's really what came down to, is that at the time, it wasn't a route that I want to go through grad school and further beyond, because I probably would have to get an office, get a couch in order to practice health psychology.
Oh man, I love that. I'm sitting here thinking though, we've been to a lot of networking events. As a matter of fact, we were recently at the Simon Pascal opening where we talked a little bit about this. And I'm wondering, like, when you're networking, are you like thinking about that has it helped you in your networking? Let me say that.
It has. It helps me identify some behaviors, like what motivates someone as I talk through with them and their life and their family. It helps me get to know them, and really just from a genuine interest standpoint, not to use it later, but just to get to know someone. What motivates, much like what you talk about today in your podcast as well. What energizes, what motivates you, and that does help in the conversations.
Yeah. Oh man, that is absolutely fantastic. Oh, I love it. I love it. So today, of course, you are serving as Director of Organizational Development. And you didn't start there. Obviously, you talked about going to college, then you served in different jobs throughout your career, and here you are now. I'm just curious, do you have a purpose? Have you found your purpose? Have you found your lane?
I think I have, Bruce. Have I found my life lane? Not yet. I'm still searching for that. For my career lane, my leadership lane, it really started when I was working with JCPenney. I had 3 rotational jobs there, which is very fortunate to have the opportunity to experience different parts of the business. One of my first rotation jobs was a social relations manager serving the Northeast region. So imagine you're in corporate office and you're serving 200 stores and a hotline. Which is great to get to know the company and the people, but that wasn't for me. And then I had an opportunity to take another role within JCPenney at Cedar Hill Distribution Center. And that was a tough decision for me because I'm thinking, I'm working at corporate. I like the environment I work in. I worked in internal HR before, but a warehouse distribution center, 60 miles one way from a house. Is this really what I want to do? And I balked at it. I said no. But then I talked to someone who was my mentor along the way. And you mentioned mentors, and they're very helpful, very important to me. And his name was Mark Morris. And if you know JCPenney's headquarters, at least what used to be, there's a little pond around the building. We would walk the pond a couple of days in the week and just talk about this opportunity. So I don't want to do it. And Mark's like, maybe you should. It's different. I'll make you grow. I'll put you outside your box, outside your comfort zone. Yeah, Mark, but 60 miles one way. I don't know if I could do that. That's wear and tear my car, my time. You know what? But I made that decision to go for it. And what I learned from that is when you're working in a warehouse distribution, you are in the heat. You are in the moment. You're side by side in the battle, if you will, with operations. And because it's very demanding environment. It's very high pressure to get some of the shipping to the stores. And at the time, Cert Hill was an unperforming center. So it's a turnaround situation. Sorry, I'm walking into unknown environment, but I realized I love that environment. Get to know the people, the leadership, the operations, understand the business. We talk about HR, understand the business, getting to see the table. That was my first experience getting close to business. When you support corporate and work corporate, you're far away from the business.
Right.
And so it was a life-changing moment for me. And ever since then, I told myself, I want to work in an operation-driven company where I can work side by side with leadership, understand the business problems to help them. That's where I can make the most impact. And I was terrified when I first went. In fact, I walked into the center and I took a tour and there's one person I remember looked at me and said, you're not going to make it. you're not going to last more than 2 weeks. Just maybe looking at me and I don't know what made them say that, but that was a challenge too. And so it was something that I cherished. And ever since then, after JCPenney, I've been working in an operational driven company. Every transportation, operation driven, serving the community through our operations. Most of our employees are drivers. We work in the field, and corporate's only 1% of our total company. That really changed me and changed my perspective of where I want to work within HR.
That is a fantastic story. I love that. As you're telling that story, it takes me back to a couple of different jobs that I had. And I remember in the moving and storage business, the first company I started to work for, they said, hey, if you're going to be in management or sales, you need to start on the trucks. And so I'm like, I'm going to move furniture, carry a piano up 3 flights of stairs. Are you kidding me? And that was the best experience ever. I spent a year in the trucks and then in operations for about 8 years. And so I do have a question though. I love the comment about you're not going to make it. I can see that because what made him probably think that is there's probably been, corporate comes and does a walkthrough and nobody really gets in, right? Gets in the weeds, gets in the business. But my question to you is, and I shared some questions with you, of course, to kind of help us drive conversation, but some of these I didn't ask, so I hope this is okay. But how were you able to develop trust in that organization? Because, hey, you're the HR guy, you're coming in, you're going to sit in the seat next to the guys that are making it happen. How were you able to develop trust?
It's a very good question, Bruce, because you nailed it when you said, here comes corporate, because it's a rotational assignment. They had someone before me, they'll have someone after me. So I had to learn the jobs. So one of the first things I did is I worked the shifts. I went to receiving. How do these trucks come in? Let me help you unload. And then I went to the unpacking department to unpack the boxes, put the garments on the system and the racks, and follow the whole chain throughout the whole facility, all the way from receiving to shipping and how it's done. So that's one thing to say, I'm willing to work and learn. And it's not like what I maybe just did an hour of it. I did days of it. I made the commitment because one of the things you have to do is show that you're willing to be there with them. And you're not just going to leave at 5 o'clock because you're from corporate.
Hmm.
And then I'd sat down with leadership one by one and get to know them and understand who they are. Because like you would imagine, when you walk in an environment like that, underperforming center from corporate, you get wind of things. They tell you, hey, here, the leadership team is not good. And here's someone who needs to be on a performance plan. So I want to get to know them, say, okay, what's my assessment?
Mm.
You know, I'll use their assessments from afar with a grain of salt, but I want to get to know them. And so it really took time to build that trust relationship by take the time to get to know them.
Mm.
And really say, you know, you could believe me and trust me because I'm here for you, and not see me as someone's trying to just push someone else's agenda.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Last year, we're going to talk about the conference here shortly, but last year I spoke at the conference about developing influence with the C-suite. And number one thing we got to do is we need to build trust. And the reason why a lot of people fail is because they know that it takes time to build trust. It takes time to build relationships. And I'm glad you said that, because that's really the key is, are you willing to invest that time to really get to know people? And what did you take away from that experience?
That you can have an impact on people's lives.
Yeah.
Yes, you know, I mentioned the turnaround situation. After 2.5 years, we
Yeah.
did turn around the division with turnover, engagement, productivity improved. But really what motivated me and what I learned is that you can turn around people's performance or their lives. I mean, like I mentioned, there's some leaders that were underperforming in the eyes of others. And when you work with them side by side, coach, clear expectations,
Hmm.
and communicate and help and develop, they could develop themselves into more than others thought or they thought. And so when I walked away and when I saw some of the folks after that, maybe a year later on, and they said, hey, Brian, here's what you helped me with. I still have your emails. I would send a lot of emails of leadership tips, you know, and things to think about, thinking, I don't know if they're listening to me. I hope they are, because it's good information. I talked to them about it. For them to bring it up after the fact, it just tells you the impact you have on them without you even knowing it. And so I learned that. And that what motivates me, one employee at a time, or in case, you know, leaders, one leader at a time. That's how you make the movement of, you know, with the culture and the business.
Man, I got to tell you right now, I got chills on that with someone saying, I still have your email. That is so fantastic. Hey, listen, if you are listening right now, hopefully you can pull over, get out your pen, get out your notepad. There's a lot of things that you're going to be able to take away from this, but I love that you can help one person at a time. And it takes me back to a story I heard. I was watching a special, Dan Rather, he was interviewing these different artists. And I actually put this story in my book, Find Your Lane. And the story was around the country and Western singer, Charlie Daniels. And he was interviewing Charlie Daniels, and he asked him the question, hey, you know, what's some advice you would give to someone coming up the business? And of course, I was all ears because I was thinking, any advice, what is it? And he said, don't ever look at the empty seats. Look, and I thought immediately, I was like, that's right. Just the people that are there, focus on them. And that's what you did. You focused on the people in that distribution center, got to know them, and look at the impact you made. And now you're able to share that with the Life in the Leadership Lane community. You never know right now who's going to right now say, hey, I'm going to take a different path, or I'm going to keep on this path I'm going. Maybe I'm not hearing something just like you weren't. But I'm just going to keep going. So I appreciate you sharing that perspective.
You're welcome. And sometimes you have to push yourself out of your boundaries to grow, right? We've heard that many times.
Yeah.
And until you experience yourself and let yourself go and be open to new experiences, I would not have found that path. And maybe I'll be sort of searching for it, because within HR, as you know, you can work at all different companies, all different industries. But you have to find something that's meaningful for you, and especially mission-driven companies and operational companies is something that I found. But you have to be intentional with it. You know, when you join an organization or a new job, when you talk about building trust, I have a philosophy of onboarding that I try to instill on others. Is, if you ever read the book First 90 Days by Michael Watkins, it's a great book. and there's others for journeys to build that credibility we're talking about, Bruce.
Yep.
But one of the things I got from that book and others is kind of the phase of discovery, diagnosis, direction. So when you're in a new job, you first want to discover things. You're a sponge, you're learning things, you're soaking things up, you're asking questions. Then eventually you move into diagnosis. What's my thought? What's my analysis? And then you move in direction. And so you want to move through those phases, not too fast. As you typically hear, you don't want to come in and say, I know exactly what the problem is after 2 weeks, and here's my direction, because people won't buy into that. You really have to show general interest that you're trying to discover and learn, but you also have the leadership. You demonstrate that forethought, saying, here's my analysis. What do you think? And then let's do this together. Here's the direction. After, say, 60, 90 days, you should have some idea what your direction is. Not the full plan, but that's what I did at Cedar Hill. And when I left Cedar Hill and went to, actually left JCPenney eventually to another operational warehouse company, it was a turnaround situation, did the same thing there. And I learned after about 2.5 years, when you're talking about a small center, like 200-300 people or company, you can make sustained changes to the culture of the business. Be intentional with it. Now, if you're talking about a larger company, it takes more time to have that impact.
Sure.
It's one of the things I've learned along the way to help me build that trust, but also to get results, because you have to, in your leadership role, you have to get results. You got to be intentional with it.
I would think though also, and by the way, first 90 days, I will put that link in the show notes. I think people might be interested in reading that. I would think also that going into the distribution center in Cedar Hill, you had to like get in there to figure out what it's all about. You had some success there. So then the next place you go to, the word that comes to mind is belief, right? You now know that because you've experienced that, you even believe even more. Of course, you're more confident. Talk a little bit about the importance of belief, like that next organization. How important was that?
That was very important. It's when I was at Cedar Hill, I'm learning. And this is all new to me. But then once you have that belief, you have that confidence, you have that track history that you could lend yourself on and kind of rely on yourself. And then you walk into another place, maybe the situation is similar, a little bit different, but you leverage the experience you've had. You know, many of our growth and success is leveraged on prior experiences. And so I learned a lot and saying, okay, what I really learned is leadership is very important. You have to work on employees, get to know them, engage with them. But if you don't have a strong leadership team, and they don't have a high-performing team, you're not going to succeed. So you really have to look at that group and saying, okay, where are they today as far as a unit individually? And then where do they need to be tomorrow for you to be successful? And so that does take the time of that discovery, diagnosis, and direction, as it only relates to the leadership team, not only everything else you have to do to be successful. And that's the primary thing I learned and took with me is that leadership focus. So from that JCPenney days, I knew and worked with a lot of great leaders. So I brought some of them over, right? Typically what happens if you know a great leadership team or someone who's great leadership and you have an opportunity in prior life, you experience them, you bring them over. Hey, Paul, I have a great opportunity at this new company here. I saw what you did. We worked well together. Join us and help us move this company to the next level as well. And that served very well in that new journey at the other company.
That is so fantastic. This is such good stuff. I love that. I want to continue to talk a little bit about this as we talk about leadership 2021. And one of the conversations I was having with you, because we're talking a little bit about leadership development, and I always like to ask this question: what exactly is organizational development? And then how does that align with personal development?
So organization development is a fancy word for helping companies improve their business through their people, much like we're talking about today.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. So when you look at the employee development, individual development, that's where it starts from, right? A lot of what we've been talking about is looking at performance and training and development along the way. So when you look at organization development, how do you improve a company through its people? Companies are a people business. No matter what they do, they're in a people business. So you work with their employees, not only their leaders, but their individual employees as well. Individual contributors are just as important as their leaders. And so when I'm talking about going to Cedar Hill or this other company, again, it's really looking at the people. What can we do to get them engaged or get them to, you mentioned belief, get them to believe in that we can do this together. There's a lot of history, a lot of times you walk into, right? And whether you're walking into a successful situation or not. And sometimes when you're new, they're like, man, I don't know if, again, you're not, Brian, you're not going to make it. I got to get them to believe in me. And then we could, not only that, I'm going to be here. Yes, I'm going to be here tomorrow and Thursday and Friday, but we're going to do this together. And so a lot of that is focused on the development and the strategy of the people side of it. You know, if you look at HR, people, programs, policies, the 3 Ps of HR. And so you look at the people, you look at the programs, and you look at the policies and what is working, what's not. And through that process, in looking at organizational development in those lens, you get to identify the kind of SWOT analysis, right? You know, where you're at today and where you need to be going forward. And not tomorrow you're going to make it, but what is realistic? Progress over perfection is something I always have to remind myself, because it's so easy to say, hey, I'm impatient. I recognize that myself at times. I want to get results, but you have to recognize how you're going to get there and get people along with you so you don't move too fast. And in a lot of change management, which is a big part of organization development, because you have to bring people along with you. You have to be patient and understand where they're at in the change curve, and decide what actions you need to take today to get yourself at least moving in the right direction. And it might be hard at first, but you get momentum.
Yeah.
Right. Once employees start seeing some change, it's the first step. You have to believe that you can be consistent. Okay, now my leadership team really does care about me. My boss is asking how my days. He never did that before. Is he going to do it next week, next month? And so the leadership team, everyone needs to be consistent in the actions and behaviors. That's a big part of organizational development to create that cultural change. And but it takes time for people to believe and see that commitment from leadership is real and not just a fad like sometimes there are.
Yeah, listen, there is so much here. I absolutely love this. The first thing that I was thinking about was whenever you start talking about progress over perfection. And I remember Adrienne Court, who is the CHRO over at Alchemy, she had shared the term OTL. She called it over the line. And she said, most people are so focused on making it perfect before they begin. She said, you just need to get it 85% of there, and then you can figure out the rest along the way. And that's what you're talking about. You're talking about progress over perfection. But my other note I made on this was that the importance of creating momentum. And I think this is probably the biggest challenge, not just in the workplace, just in everything we do in life. It's hard to get started, but once you get started, start getting momentum, it makes it a lot easier. And you talked about the importance of momentum, and that starts with everything you've talked about, the little things, but you use this one word that really hit home for me, and that was, you said being consistent. And I think that's where a lot of people miss, is that because they're not able to be consistent, they get focused on too many things or different things or whatever it is. They're not able to sustain that momentum. So I have a question. You are very, very passionate. I love it. What drives you? What drives you, Brian?
A lot of things. You know, first and foremost, my family. You know, it's ever since I have twin girls, 5-year-old that turned 5 in September, just a month from now. So they get me up every day, whether I want to get up or not. And right, they drive me to get out of the bed and really be passionate, because at the end of the day, you know, we're here as a leadership role, we're here to help others. And if I can make that difference, and like we talked about, I've learned I made difference in people's lives, and whether they tell me or not,
Mm,
that's one thing that does energize me. Again, going back to these emails, right?
I
And
love
simple
that.
things,
I
emails,
love that.
the people are listening. And sometimes when my current company in my role, I do the same thing. I send these emails and I'll get the reply, say, hey, thank you, Brian, very good information. Sometimes you get crickets, right? But again, almost like we said earlier, is listen to those people in those seats, right? It's looking not folks who are not that I'm not hearing from, but the people who I'm hearing from that I know are making a difference.
Mm-hmm.
One leader, one employee at a time, I know I'm making a difference. So when I go to work, I might not get the adoption rate that I want in a lot of my programs. In HR, that's difficult sometimes. But you're making progress with a few, and if those get it, and then you just build the momentum, that's what gets me. And I look forward to coming to work every day, especially in a new world, new environment, and how we could continue to get the leaders on the same page.
That's fantastic. Do you, and I'm just curious, do you have a leadership development program, or are you focused more on, I'm just going to be intentional by, walking slowly through the crowd, finding who needs help, and I'm going to help them develop?
Well, we do. We have succession planning.
Okay.
And we also have programs to develop folks through that program and other tools if they're not in part of the program. But we want to be intentional with folks and helping them find their careers. So whether that's online through what we call MVU, or a typical LMS system, a lot of courses and activities, or is that more intentional leadership development program? In fact, I'm in the process of putting one in place, hopefully later this year, because we had to put something on hold last year. And whenever we have a chance to relook at things, you want to elevate it, improve it, move things forward. And so that's something I'm doing to our current program, seeing how we could elevate it to next levels before I roll it out.
Yeah, that is fantastic. And I cannot wait to hear more about that. I may have to have you back on the show next time to tell us more about how that program is going. I love that. I want to spend some time here for a few minutes and talk about your other role in your career, and that is the conference director for the HRSouthwest conference. And so tell me a little bit about that. I mean, that's coming up. When is the conference, and what are you excited about?
Well, first, I'm very honored to be the conference director. I remember going to the conference years ago. You first walk into the Fort Worth Convention Center, you're looking around, there's so much here. You feel lost, disconnected, right? And here I am, I volunteered the conference, was on education session committee, helping identify the speakers and sessions, and it's a great opportunity for anyone who wants to get involved into the conference. And then, eventually be the director, to have the ability to influence, shape the conference. That's exciting. And so when you look at a conference, it's 61 days away. And so when we're looking October 10th to 13th, that's the in-person. Yes, we were having an in-person conference. We're going, we're putting our foot in the water, and we're going to stick there, which is exciting, of course, because last year we didn't have the opportunity to be in person.
Right.
Then we're also providing an option, a choice for those who are not comfortable yet, or maybe can't join in person, to join the virtual conference the following week. And that's going to be the 17th, starting the 17th. So we have options for folks, regardless of what their situation is. They could come in person and or be virtual. You could do both if you want.
That's exciting. I love that. You mentioned about being in the leadership role, you're able to influence and shape the conference. I love that. I agree with that 100%. And one of the things the conference director gets to do each year is also pick the theme of the conference, right? And so this year we call it a tagline. And you picked the tagline, learn, network, and grow. I say your team picked the learn, network, and grow. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, why did you pick that theme, and what are you hoping to get out of that?
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. So one of the things that when I was nominated conference director, and I thought about this before, when you look at HR South Conference in the past years, there've been taglines every year. Mm-hmm. And it changes. Yeah. But one of the things that I talk to others about is that we want a tagline that we don't change every year. The attendees know who we are, what to expect, And then we know who we are. So we could almost, you think about mission statement or purpose that we design things around and gives our focus. So when you look at the conference, by the way, this is the 80th anniversary of the conference. So we've been around a long time.
80 years. That is fantastic.
And every year, if you look at a conference, what do we do? What do attendees expect? They expect to come to the conference to learn, to network, and to grow. Three simple words, but they're very powerful. So when we look at having that as a tagline, not only this year, but that's our tagline going forward. So when attendees go to the conference, they know what to expect. And as we're trying to shape the conference, like you and I talked about, we know what our focus is. And so everything is going to be aligned with that. So when you look at learn, how can we help our attendees learn? Well, we're going to focus on takeaways. So what are some takeaways, not learning objectives that we focus on prior, but what are takeaways that attendees are going to get from the session? Maybe it's an idea, maybe it's a thought, maybe it's a best practice. So we try to align with the speakers up front. Hey, when you submit your proposal, think about takeaways. What can attendees learn? And we're also going to help speakers refocus their takeaways in their presentation. So the attendees know what the session is and ideas. So how do we help people grow? Is by talking through those ideas. So we're going to pilot something in the conference. So we'll see how it goes, where if you think about, you walk out of session, you have this aha moment, or you're wondering, what did Bruce think about that speaker or that topic? What is he doing in his company about engagement, whatever it is. So we're going to try little post-it notes outside the session. You can write your thought. Hey, what was your takeaway? And then people can review that post-it board afterwards and say, that's a good idea. Because sometimes, Bruce, all we need is a seed, a little thought. And then we let it grow in our mind. We talk to others. So we want to help our attendees with those thoughts that you learn from a session. That's one way we're going to do it, and we'll see how that works. And we're also going to do other things to help them grow at the conference. So again, it's just a way to align of who we are and what we do and attendees to expect by having those three simple words: learn, network, and grow.
I love that. Oh my goodness. That is so good. The takeaways. I cannot wait to now go, I get to speak at the conference once again this year, and I cannot wait to go outside and look and see kind of what some of the people write for takeaway. I love that. Hey, I want to ask you, so you're the conference director, but I'm pretty sure you're not doing everything yourself. You got a pretty big team, don't you? Tell me a little bit about how, who's involved like in the conference.
So we have, right, it's definitely, it's a collaboration, like anything else that we do in our lives to get things done. So we have a big volunteer team. We have 4 main groups, actually 5. We have education session committee who work all year long to identify, work with speakers like yourself on the topics and get them prepared and making sure that our education is valuable. It's timely, the conversations that we want to have today. And then we have another team that focuses on special events. We have a Monday night and Tuesday night reception, other things during the course of the week. They're going to help plan that. And then we also have registration folks to help you folks, the attendees, get in right away and start their learning. And then we also have a team that's partners for SHRM on the bookstore. And then lastly, we also have our student focus. And that's a big part of who we are, is how can we engage with our students? And so we have all these different activities going on to help bring all this together. Then of course we have the Dallas HR staff that really helps and guide us. They do a great job of giving us the autonomy and making sure we don't misstep, but allows us to make decisions, allow me to work with the team, that I mentioned, to shape this year's conference.
How has volunteer leadership? I mean, obviously you're very passionate about it. I mean, you're now the conference director, you're leading one of the top conferences in the country. How has volunteer leadership helped you in your career? And the reason I want to ask you this is because there's a lot of people out there, maybe listening right now, who they'd like to volunteer, but they don't have time, or they're just not sure about it. How has it helped you?
It's helped me to expand my horizons, right? You're thrown into different experiences. These are peers. Yeah. These are not people in my organization. I didn't know them beforehand, and all of a sudden I'm working with people this year as a conference director that volunteering that never been to a conference before. So it's a different environment, especially with the pandemic going on. You have to be flexible and flexible in different ways of the unknown, more than ever before, because when you work in your company, you have a lot more knowns. You know more things, right?
Yeah.
And the conference here, you don't. This is the first time I've been a director, and the last time I'll be a director, right? So I'm going through this the first time with a team, and I have a team that's, the committee directors, the first time their committee directors going through this. So we're trying to find our way together. And so it's also, I mentioned earlier, collaboration. You're working together to find your way through this. And so it really shows the importance and the value of the collaboration to get these done, because it's a teamwork all across the board to put something like this together and be successful.
I heard John Maxwell one time talk about leaders, and he said, if you really want to test your leadership, go be a volunteer leader. Because those people don't actually report to you. And how true is that, man? I'm right there with you. Volunteering has just impacted my career so many ways. Hey, I want to ask you a question. There may be somebody listening right now and says, you know what, I'm going to try this conference, or I'm planning on going to this conference. What is a tip that you might give someone? Maybe it's their first time, and you talked about learning, obviously the educational sessions. We know what growing is, but networking is so hard, Brian. What is a tip you might give to someone whenever they open those doors and they see all these people? Give the listeners just a couple of tips they might think about as they attend the conference this year.
You're right. Networking is not easy for everyone. And so, one of the things is it's okay to walk up to somebody, introduce yourself. And that's one of the first things I found through my networking career, is that I was first hesitant to walk up, not only to one person, but if there's already a current conversation going on and feel like I'm interjecting into that conversation, that's what networking is about. People want to engage with you. People want to get to know you. So it wasn't as if I was intruding. The invite was there. I just have to recognize it and take that leap forward to introduce and invite myself to that conversation. And the warmth you feel when people are talking to you, it brings down your barrier. So one thing I would say is it's okay to introduce yourself, open the doors, the invite's there. Another thing is, if you don't feel comfortable walking up to somebody, get to know somebody who you already know, right? Maybe you don't interact with them all the time, but you know them in past lives, or you remember something about them and in passing. Hey, Bruce, do you remember me? We met a long time ago, and that's regardless, right? That history, whether I'm right or wrong, it's opened the door for you and I to talk about. And so using a small piece of information that I might know about you, it helps to break down the barriers, I think, to say, at least the first introduction. And then lastly is, if you are not comfortable doing that, observe, be involved, be around, because I think the more you're around that environment, someone actually might come up walking towards you and introduce themselves. You don't want to depend on that for networking, but if you're not comfortable yourself, at least you can't network if you're not there. And you can't grow, again, if you don't put yourself out there. So I think it's okay to stand around and walk around, and because eventually someone might walk up to you saying, hi, my name's Brian. People want to know you. People want to connect. It just, it's that perception whenever you go, you're thinking that, if you see two people talking, that they know each other and they've been friends for life, but yet they might have just met and they're looking to meet someone else. And so one of the other things I would just real quickly mention is, in the past, I've had people reach out to me on LinkedIn or send a note on LinkedIn saying, hey, I'm going to be at the conference. If anybody's going, let me know. And you can certainly kind of prepare ahead of time for that. But I think networking is one of those areas that will also help you grow. And it's a great opportunity to really start expanding your network. Hey, for someone who wants to attend, how would they register for the conference? You could go two ways. You go to dallashr.org, and there's a link to the Southwest Conference, or you go to www.HRSouthwest.com, and then there'll be the direct link to the conference site. Registration is open. It's been open since May, so I'm sure you'll be able to put a link onto your podcast for that. Yeah, we'll definitely put a link to that.
And if you have any questions, I'll also have Brian's information. You can reach out to him for any additional questions. And I absolutely cannot wait to learn, network, and grow at this year's HR Southwest conference. Hey, I wish you the incredible success this year at the conference. I cannot wait to see what comes of that. Hey, I want to talk real quick. I want to talk about leading Brian. Leadership is every day. And I always like to try to pull out, do you have a daily discipline, something you do every day that helps you keep on track, Brian?
Yeah, when I wake up, I try to be patient with my girls, who every day you just never know what the thing's going to bring, right? But outside of that is looking at this week, looking at the next couple of weeks to look at my calendar, what's due, to really set the stage. I usually do it on Fridays, actually, so I know beginning of the week what I need to do. So I walk on Monday, just ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
So being organized is one, knowing your schedule, but looking that foresight, to know what are the demands of me and my team the next few weeks, next month, so I can make sure I put things in the right place this week.
Yeah. I think that's so important. I do that on weekends, just plan my whole week, and then I try to look out at it. That's so good. I mean, everybody seems to have a system, people that are making impact. Hey, before we get into It's Time to Accelerate, I want to ask you one last question. I always like to ask if you've ever received any advice that you just continue to find yourself sharing with others.
Follow your passion. Whatever makes you happy, and so that's something, your job, something, your life, something that you asked me the question earlier today, what energizes you? And it's following my passion, whether my family or helping people, with their job, helping people develop. That's what energizes me. That's my passion. So that's my advice. So, follow what makes you happy.
Follow your passion, man. I'm energized right now. That is so good. I love it. Well, we've come to the part of the show where I call It's Time to Accelerate. I'm going to just ask you a few questions. And one of those questions I always like to start out, because I'm a big book reader and I'm a big podcaster. I always love to know, would you rather read a book or listen to a podcast?
Podcasts these days. Easier for my time as I walk the dog or I go for a ride in my car.
Oh man, isn't that the truth? Oh my God. Any favorites?
Of course. Yours. Life in the Leadership Lane.
Life in the Leadership Lane.
That's because what you're doing, Bruce, you're talking to people, giving different perspectives. And if you could glean one thing from these conversations from each person, they add up over time, and you get to learn from all the different folks you've had on your podcast, different point of views, and that's a great way to learn.
I'll tell you a real quick story. I am finished my book, and it's coming out in October. I hope to have it displayed at the HR Southwest conference. It's called Life in the Leadership Lane. And one of the stories I tell at the end of the book, I'll just kind of share this real quick. And that is, when I was playing high school football, our defense was ranked number one in the state. We had 7 straight shutouts. Everybody started calling us the green brick wall. And you would see these signs on the fences of football games. You'd see all the the banners and stuff in the community, and it was really energizing and exciting times. And I was thinking about, on Life in the Leadership Lane, every single time I ask someone if they share some advice, I take that advice and that becomes my brick. So just like you, find your passion. That will be a brick that I'm just laying. And you talked about one person at a time earlier. It's laying one brick at a time. And so I'm forming this brick wall and it's basically a brick wall of advice. And because of those bricks, I'm even getting better in my leadership. And my hope is that, anybody who's listening will be able to get better too. Isn't that cool?
That's a great way of looking at it, and helping others through your avenues. You have a voice. Yeah. People are listening. So that's great to
oh my gosh. Oh, I love this. I love this. Hey, I know I asked you earlier about energize, but I want to know what you're grateful for.
I'm grateful for my family. End of the day, if it wasn't for, a job is great to have, the people, but end of the day, I'm grateful for my values, my belief, my religious belief. I'm grateful to wake up every day. I've been very fortunate in my life to be where I'm at today. And this take time, especially having kids do help you do that, because they grow up so fast. You hear every day, but it's just for appreciating every day that you have with everybody. That's what I'm grateful for.
I remember I have 3 children. I remember when our youngest was born, and a lady saying, you know, don't blink, they'll grow up fast. And I blinked and they grew up, and it really does. So now I'm sharing that with my daughter. She's got a 2 and a 4-year-old, and it's the same way. I'm like, hey, don't blink. They're going to grow up so fast. So I love that. Hey, you got the conference coming up. You got this leadership development program coming up. You got a lot of stuff happening. What are you most excited about as you finish 2021 and get into 2022?
I'm most excited about finishing the year safe and healthy, right?
Yes.
And having, I'm very, excited for the conference to be back live in person. I shouldn't say live, but really in person is something we have not experienced in the last couple of years. I'm also excited to go to Disney World and with my girls before the conference to take a little relaxer and before the fun that does happen and the busyness that we'll have that weekend, unless actually the 2 weeks with the in-person and virtual conference. So it's a lot of things that I'm going to be excited for the back half of the year.
That's fantastic. You know, I mentioned the conference earlier, and I just want to ask this question real quick. You mentioned about being safe. And I didn't ask this question earlier. I want to just take the time to ask real quick. What about the HR Southwest conference? You know, you're having the live event and the virtual event. During the live event, have you put some things to help people feel safe?
We have, for the in-person conference, we're using social distancing,
Good.
Making sure people are comfortable. So what that means is, if you think about the theater style where the seats are next to each other, crammed, to get to the row, people have to shift their knees and they'll pass you by. There's going to be plenty of leg room, plenty of arm room, but yet you'll still be able to join the education experiences and the sessions there. So that's one of the things we're doing there. We also have colored lanyards, red, green, and yellow. And you pick what lanyard you want based on your comfort level interacting with someone. So if you're comfortable interacting in normal distancing from interactions, you put the green on. If you want a little caution and maybe using the 6-foot rule as a guideline, you put the yellow on. If you say, hey, you know what, I want to stay my distance. We could talk maybe from 10 feet, whatever that is means to you, you put the red on. So then before you walk up to somebody, their comfort zone. And so you can guide your interactions with them accordingly. And there's going to be other safety precautions with sanitizers and spraying, everything you would come to expect. But that's one thing that's different that you may not understand or expect from a conference, that we're going to help you communicate your comfort zone, because that's very important, because we want to make sure that if someone's interacting with me, they respect my comfort zone, whatever that may be. And that's one way of signifying what that is.
I love that. I was actually thinking about, man, I wish like people had like all time had lanyards, like for a fist bump or a handshake or a hug. I mean, let me know before that is fantastic. I appreciate you sharing that. And so people will know kind of what to expect there. And again, I'll put all the links in the show notes for people that have questions. Hey, I got one final question for you. It's my favorite question I like to ask. And here's a question that is, Brian, 10 years older, is out there knocking at your door right now. And you're going to go answer that door. I would love to hear what he's going to say to you.
Relax. It's going to be okay. It's easy to be in a moment of today, being stressed out with the conference, everything else. There's a lot of details. It does wear on you a little bit at work. What's going to happen? When are we going to go back to our office? What's going to look like with pandemic? So everything's going to be okay. Relax. Take a breath.
Yeah.
And my daughters watch Daniel Tiger, and one of the things that one of the episodes about being mad, and one of the things that he teaches them is take a deep breath and count to 4. 1, 2. It'll be okay.
Okay, I'm gonna try that. I love it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great tips. This has been so energizing to visit with you, and I appreciate you coming onto the show today and just sharing your wisdom and perspective. Brian, for people that want to connect with you, I mentioned earlier, people may have some questions around, well, maybe some things you shared around organizational development or the conference. How is the best way for them to connect?
LinkedIn.
Okay.
There's the best way without having my direct email or phone number. I would just say, reach out to LinkedIn, whether we're connections or not, reach out and they'll be happy to talk or explore or engage.
And I always like to share this when you're reaching out on LinkedIn. It always helps putting in a note. So just put in the note, hey, I heard your conversation on life in the leadership lane, and he'll immediately know where that came from. So, hey, man, I appreciate you. You're definitely driving in the leadership lane. And I cannot wait to share this podcast. I just want to say thanks again for being on the show and for your friendship.
Thank you, Bruce. Likewise, I enjoyed it.